Welcome everybody to today's joint stakeholder forum. My name's Joe Shields and I lead one of our engagement teams within the Circular Economy Directorate in DEFRA, and I'll be your host for today's forum. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So today's joint stakeholder forum is a combined meeting for our stakeholders across the Circular Economy Directorate, and it will be the same format as previous iterations of this forum to accommodate the high volume of attendees that we have. The Q&A function will be open throughout the forum for you to submit questions, and there will be adequate time for us to take questions between presentations where possible. Please note that we'll only be taking questions on the subject matter that we discussed during today's call, and if I could ask you all to listen to each presentation in its entirety before submitting questions, as your question may be answered further on in the presentation, and this helps us keep track and respond to each of your questions in turn. We'll work to answer as many questions as we can during today's forum, but given the massive volume of attendees, we may need to take questions away. If this is the case, we'll make sure to provide answers in our Circular Economy newsletter to those questions. So I strongly advise that each of you are subscribed to our Circular Economy newsletter if you're not already, and there are details on how to subscribe later on in the presentation. So when submitting questions, if I could please ask each of you to reference the agenda item to which your question relates. This will be helpful as we've got various subtopics, and this will help us keep track of which questions they are. So for example, if your question relates to simple recycling, please pop simple recycling at the start of your question. Lastly, this session will be recorded, and a recording will be sent out via our Circular Economy newsletter. So again, please do make sure that you are signed up to that if not already. Again, instructions on how to do so will be included later on in the slide deck. Without further ado, if we could move on to the next slide, please. And just a quick run through of today's agenda. As you can see, very packed. I won't run through each of them in detail, but we will endeavour to finish on time as best we can. If we could flick forward one more, as you can see, the updates continue across 2 slides. So we're aiming to finish around 4 p.m. today. Next slide, please. Lovely. Without further ado, if I could hand over to Dex for an update on extended producer responsibility for packaging, please.
Sure. Thanks, Joe, and good to see you all today. For those that don't know me, I'm Dexter Davis, Project Director here at DEFRA, Extended Producer Responsibility for Packaging, or PPR. Look, I wanted to give a fairly in-depth overview of some sort of developments on PPR as we sort of move forward the policy, continuously improve it, acting on lots of the feedback, engagement, etc., that we've had with stakeholders right across the value chain. And today is a big day in all of that. So if we just skip through to the next slide, please. Look, I won't pause too long on this slide because there's a lot to get through and this is sort of contextual, but just to underscore, PPR is super important. By implementing the polluter pays principle, it is going to provide us a crucial foundation to our plans for circularity across the packaging sector and further afield. And also to underscore, our approach has been underpinned for a number of years now by in-depth engagement right across the value chain, working with industry to establish and now to continuously improve the policy. So the key thing today then that happens is to announce that the government will be notifying an amending statutory instrument, or SI, to the EU. That's the first amending SI, and it kicks off a process that will bring that SI into force for the start of next year. If we skip to the next slide, I'll get into a bit more detail on that. So what is in this SI? The critical change is to grant powers to appoint a producer responsibility organisation, effectively to make good on our government's long-standing commitment to establish producer leadership right at the heart of this scheme. Look, it's crucial for genuine producer responsibility, which is the principle of the scheme, and it will also help align us with international best practice. I'll come to that in a bit more detail in a second, but to note that that's not the only thing this amending SI does. It also provides provisions for closed-loop recycling systems, whereby producers who collect and recycle their plastic packaging for food-grade recycling will be able to offset what they recycle against their EPR obligations, and that will include this first year of operation. It then also includes a series of operability changes, which I don't suggest I go through in detail here today. They're sort of relatively small technical fixes that will just make the scheme easier for PAC UK, but also the producers to operate within it. I should though note that this does include one technical change that will be of interest to some, which is to amend the fibre-based composite material definition such that from year 2 onwards, it introduces a threshold to exclude paper and card with plastic content equal to or below 5%. So in other words, FBC will only apply now for any paper or card with a layer of plastic and total weight of plastic exceeding 5%. That will bring us into alignment, importantly, with the way the EU defines composite materials, so hopefully helpful in that sort of wider market context. We'll provide more details on some of the sort of technical changes in the newsletter that follows this forum. We switch to the next slide, please. Look, coming back to this key change in the SAI, appointing the PRO. Most of you will be aware that the starting point for PEPR in the UK is different to most international comparisons. Unlike many schemes around the world, the UK already had an established curbside collection regime and billions of pounds already invested in recycling and waste treatment infrastructure. So because of this, the UK scheme administrator, now PAC UK, was classified a couple of years ago by the ONS as a public sector body. That hasn't changed, but we always recognise that there are clear efficiencies of producer-led schemes and have sought to maximise producer leadership in design and operation. So our collective intent, and that's a four-nation intent, is over time to delegate all but the sovereign functions of this scheme to a PRO. And so to commence this process, and alongside today's amending SI, we're launching an expression of interest process, which will invite any prospective PRO candidates to set out their interest and propose the key roles that they think the PRO should take, growing over time as it establishes from next year. So this form will set out the key functions of the scheme that a PRO could play a role in. A link to that form is provided in this pack and will also be in the newsletter and a letter to follow. So that will all be accessible. On timings, and you see them here, subject to parliamentary process, we expect to appoint a PRO early in 2026. And I do underscore that our expectation is that PRO will then need to establish a plan with PAC UK to show how it will ensure a smooth transition over time. Otherwise, this would add a great deal of sort of operability risk, if you like, and value for money risk. I should also note that during this process, we'll ensure that there's full local government involvement in the work to get the right PRO proposition. Again, for obvious reasons, this only works if the PRO is working hand in glove with the local authorities that deliver these services. And we propose to do this through the Local Government Association and DEFRA Circular Economy Sounding Board, who can bring in a range of experts from across all tiers of local government collection recycling services. Okay, so that's a bit on PRO. And now if we skip to the next slide, I wanted to talk a little bit more widely about some of our broader commitments to building on feedback in a way sort of you said we did, the work that we're now going to take forward to move from version 1 of PEPR to an improved version over the next couple of years. Hopefully that underscores our clear commitment to driving improvement in this scheme and the packaging reforms more generally. These do not stop with the first year or the first SIs. So today I wanted to cover a series of areas and I'll touch on them each in a little bit of depth, but hopefully not too much. So firstly, on dual use packaging, as some of you will be aware, maybe many of you, the PEPR scheme transfers the cost of managing household waste, once it becomes waste, from local authorities to the producers supplying that packaging. However, as many of you will be aware, dual-use packaging, and that's packaging which can be discarded both in a household or a commercial context. For example, something you might consume at home or consume in a restaurant or hospitality venue. And that sort of dual-use packaging is currently typically captured by the household packaging definition, so in the scope of EPR. I should be really clear, this was a deliberate element of the policy that we consulted on. Why? Because it's really difficult to track or evidence where packaging will be discarded when first supplied by a producer, especially if there's an onwards chain. And we'd also reviewed many international schemes that had struggled to differentiate on this point and ended up driving cost, complexity, and ultimately higher fees into the scheme by trying to disentangle dual-use packaging by where it ends up. That said, we heard strongly feedback from industry, and earlier this year we ran a co-design process which concluded affected businesses, so hospitality, pubs, but also some other ones, construction, those supplying into hospitals and so on. Those businesses concluded that they wanted change, but we could not cohere on either of the sort of international approaches that we understand have been put in place to try and tackle this area. So that is where we got to. We recognise these concerns are real and still in existence. So we're not giving up there. So following today, my team will pick up with businesses to explore further proposals and consider whether and how we tackle this area. I've asked them to work as fast as possible on this, and it may be that it requires a further round of regulatory amendments and therefore consultation. So we'll proceed at pace with this once we have an agreed position, and you'll hear more from us, or those that have been involved in this work will hear more from us very soon on that matter. That's dual use. More broadly, come to efficiency and effectiveness of local authority packaging services. Again, many of you will be aware, the current scheme puts in place a range of measures to drive improved performance and ensure efficiency and effectiveness of LA services, crucially including the improvement action process, which PAC UK will pilot in summer of 2025 and will formally roll out to be applied from 2028, whereby local authorities that are performing poorly on efficiency and effectiveness measures will first be required to produce an improvement action plan, and if that doesn't require change, up to a 20% reduction in fees can be applied by PAC UK. That we think is in the sort of necessary but not sufficient bucket, and that's certainly what we've heard from industry, and we recognise additional interventions may be required. So across the nations, we'll therefore work over the summer to consider further measures to support and incentivise efficiency and effectiveness. This will focus on how we can ensure that investment through PEPR supports local authorities deliver improved outcomes and value for money. We'll be working with local government and businesses, PAC UK Efficiency and Effectiveness Committee, Technical Advisory Committee that will be set up shortly, and of course the PAC UK industry-led steering group to develop these proposals. But ultimately, this is about working to ensure that the scheme drives as quickly as possible improvements to collection and sorting, so we get higher quantities and quality of materials for recycling, reduced costs for securing those outcomes, and adoption of smarter infrastructure commissioning approaches. So we think there's a real opportunity to do that and to build sort of better carrots for the right performance, the right behaviour in the system. We'll run that sort of co-design process over the summer and aim to consult on it later this year. Then coming to litter, the UK government has been committed to reviewing whether litter should be included in the PEPR scheme. Many of you will know this. And there is a strong shared commitment to tackle the scourge of litter in our communities. This, of course, particularly underpins our plans for a deposit return scheme for drinks containers, or DRS, that will go live in October 27 in England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and Wales is still intent on following this with their own shortly. Given the criticality of DRS in this space, the UK government and DAERA in Northern Ireland have therefore decided not to progress any plans to extend PEPR payments to cover the costs of managing packaging disposed either in local authority street bins or littered on the ground. And we won't review that until at least after DRS is operational and we've had a chance to review the impact of that and whether any further need or opportunities lie. The position is a little bit different in Scotland and Wales, where those governments remain committed that PPR should cover the full net costs of both bin and ground litter clean-up and disposal, and they intend to introduce these in regulations as soon as possible. Okay, I'll keep going, so skip to the next slide, please. On RAM, this has been the subject of some forums recently. Following significant stakeholder feedback and engagement, PAC UK last week published an updated version of the recyclability assessment methodology, or the RAM. Hopefully those of you that needed to see it now have done, but again, a link will be provided. Crucially, this is a simplified and improved version and aimed at reducing complexity for those that need to report against it, provides additional and clearer guidance, and should be easier to use as well. We've listened hard to feedback and tackled all the major points of concern in terms of the operability and functionality of the first version of the RAM. So that is now in place and hopefully tackles those key issues. I should note we've also heard clear feedback just from a subset of obligated producers, and especially those with large and mixed packaging portfolios, on challenges meeting, crucially, the first reporting date deadline for RAM, which is October of this year. That's the H1 year 2 reporting deadline, if that makes sense. We have listened to that feedback and we're just in the process of finalising our plans and then intend to communicate further on what we can do to help ease that challenge around that first reporting date without moving on our firm and clear commitment to introduce modulation in year 2 of the scheme. So you'll hear more on that from us on that in due course, but I just wanted to note that we have listened and heard that feedback loud and clear. Moving then to supporting the UK grow its recycling infrastructure. This is one of the key elements, purposes of not just EPR, but the wider packaging reforms and indeed the work of the Circular Economy Directorate more generally. Within the packaging space, it's clear that the UK plastics reprocessing sector in particular has been struggling over recent years, and we're therefore working to bring a programme of work to support its stability and growth. You'll see some of the key items listed here. Strengthening the plastics packaging tax, really important in terms of supporting investment in advanced chemical recycling technology. As you'll be aware, at the budget in 2024, the government confirmed it would allow a mass balance approach for chemically recycled plastic for the purpose of PPT, and the government has now confirmed that it will implement this change from April 2027 and indeed commence the legislative process in the Finance Bill 25-26 this year. That's about a 2-year increase in or improvement in the timelines. I'll also note that pre-consumer waste will no longer be accepted as a source of recycled plastic for PPT from that same date. Then coming to packaging recovery note system, or PRNs, there has been some reform already in this place, but over the course of this year, we'll work with the value chain on further reforms to the system with the aim of levelling the playing field between domestic reprocessors and exporters of waste. We'll look at things like measures to stabilise the PRN market, reduce price volatility, and reduce exporting of plastic waste. And again, I expect us, following a period of policy development, to bring forward a consultation on key changes to the regulations later this year. And then finally, this was announced a month or 2 ago now, on food grade plastics. The FSA has recently confirmed it will act as the competent authority for food grade plastics infrastructure, and that's important. It will enable continued investment in reprocessing infrastructure, supporting businesses meet European obligations for minimum recycled content by 2030. Skip to the next slide, please. And finally, so far I've covered measures that cover all nations. I just wanted to cover a couple of things whilst we work in close partnership with all the nations that DEFRA will be specifically bringing forward, given that waste is a devolved policy competence. Today I wanted to note in particular these 2 things. Firstly, work to support glass reuse. But Clearly, reuse has a really significant role in moving towards a circular economy, and PPR regulations already create strong incentives to consider reuse, as producers are only required to report and pay household disposal costs for reusable packaging for the first time it's placed on the market. So any reuse is sort of free, if you like. And further, at the end of life, reusable packaging can be offset against household disposal cost fees if they are sent for the recycling by the producer. However, DEFRA will do more to support industry to increase reuse and refill, with a particular focus on glass as a highly reusable material. And this is an important part on how we support the future of the UK glass industry in the context of EPR. So following recent engagement with industry, my team will work with both trade glass sectors and also with closed loop environments such as events or large public institutions such as hospitals to explore opportunities to support reuse. This with a view, as you see on the slides, to launch a call for evidence in the autumn, focusing on measures to support and incentivise transition to reuse models at scale. And secondly, on these DEFRA measures, you may have seen our announcement on a Circular Economy Finance Coalition, where DEFRA, alongside the Dutch government and the Lord Mayor of London, has established this coalition to explore ways to boost investment in critical infrastructure and technologies. Again, coming back to this key tenet of EPR and the wider reforms to build investment in reprocessing here in the UK. So this work will capitalise on the regulatory certainty provided by the collection packaging reforms to ensure investment. And the coalition will start by mapping out and quantifying finance gaps and investment opportunities, and hand in hand with international finance sector, it will develop practical steps to help generate investment in the circular economy. Look, that's a really broad update. So apologies for rattling through it, but I wanted to create a bit of time to announce a series of things that are either happening today or will move into over the next year, and also leave a little bit of time for questions. I hope it's a helpful update, and as I say, underscores our commitment to working with industry to continuously improve EPR and the wider packaging system here in the UK. Just the final slide just sets out a couple of key resources and timings. I won't read it all out, but to sort of confirm or underscore on the PRO, the process starts today with the EOI. On dual use, to confirm, I've asked my team to move at pace to work with obligated producers to establish proposals or changes that we can progress ASAP, but they may require consultation. And finally, on efficiency and effectiveness, I expect us to work over the summer to engage widely to establish what further measures we can take to underpin the performance of EPR.